Todd Anderson here for the inaugural episode of Flashback by StarCityGames.com. Today we're going to be taking a look at some pictures, and I'm going to take you down memory lane, so join me. Grand Prix Houston 2010, I believe. This was my format. This extended format was so much fun. Dark Depths and Thopter Foundry were both legal in the same format. They were both in the same deck. My top four match was against Adam Yurchik, who was the eventual winner. I actually played him in the Swiss and beat him in the Swiss. Being my first Grand Prix top 8, it really felt like my accomplishments were starting to match my expectations. Balefire Liege, are you serious? Why would you do this to me? Hold on. Actually, no, I have something for this. We have a Japanese foil Balefire Liege in my wallet. That's how much this card means to me. I wrote an article, one of my first few articles on Star City Games. I wrote in real time where I played a deck featuring Balefire Liege at the beginning, and I talked all about, how good it was and how when you are playing these Spectral Procession mirrors that, it was able to dominate and sometimes could, close the game out. What I failed to realize is that in these token-based matchups, Wrath of God was actually a great sideboard card, and my opponents all had a bunch of them. And so Balefire Liege actually became worse and worse. So by the end of the article, when I was writing it in real time as I was playing this tournament, I began to see that Balefire Liege was not so good. At Nationals a few months later, a friend of mine decided as a troll gift to buy me a Japanese foil Balefire Liege from the dealer booth. And because I top 4 Nationals and it was my first major accomplishment, the Japanese full Balefire Liege actually ended up meaning a lot more to me than I thought it would. So I kind of keep it on me at all times because it's kind of a badge of honor, but also I just love the card and I love the story. This was Nationals in 2009. I remember driving 12 hours or so from Birmingham, Alabama to play in this event, and it was the first Nationals I had ever been qualified for. Normally, when you lose in the top 4, that's the end of the road. But Nationals was a very strange format where once you had made the top 4, even if you lost, you tried to play for third place because the national team was first, second, and third place. Brad Nelson, who I had never met at the time, but I knew who he was because he had been showcased on the previous Pro Tour as being the Magic Online guy, and just a very good player who ended up getting 9th place at the Pro Tour in one of his first Pro Tours, I believe. He sat across from me playing for 3rd and 4th, and he was mean. He was just a mean guy. And, I would later come to realize that he was just, playing a character. Like, he was trying to be intimidating. He would say things to kind of get you on edge, So in game 3 of 5, Brad actually cast this card, Thought Hemorrhage. And you may not know what Thought Hemorrhage is because it gets overshadowed a lot in Modern by Slaughter games, which is the uncounterable, similar casting cost version of the card that's a lot better. But he casts Thought Hemorrhage, and I don't have a counterspell, and he names Broodmate Dragon. And aside from Mold Drifter, my deck did not have any other creatures in it that could win the game other than just casting a bunch of Cruel Ultimatums and killing him with Mold Drifter. So he was also going to take 2 Broodmate Dragons out of my hand, and instead of showing him how I had sideboarded at the time, I decided to just concede the game on the spot. A throwback to what I was saying when Brad was being very mean to me. He says, "Was it good for you?" And I kind of looked at him, and I didn't really say anything. I just kept sideboarding. I actually changed entirely how my deck was supposed to play out in the matchup. Since his deck had a bunch of black removal and a bunch of black creatures, I actually ended up sideboarding in my control deck to be a lot more aggressive on the play, and I boarded in 4 copies of Great Sable Stag. So in game 4, I'm on the play. I cast turn 3 Great Sable Stag, turn 4 Great Sable Stag, and turn 5, he doesn't have a creature that can block. So I just start killing all his creatures and hitting him for 6 every turn until he dies. And then after that game, I said, "Was that good for you?" After the match, we talked a little bit more, and he apologized later on for being kind of a jerk. I ended up, winning the match and being on the national team. So that's me about 30 pounds ago. This was, I believe, 2013 Grand Prix Louisville. So this tournament was really special because I got to top 8 with 2 good friends, Brad Nelson and Braun-Duin. I believe me and Brad played the exact same 75, and BBD ended up playing 1 card different, which was the 4th Muta Vault. You know, that 1 card different meant he won the tournament, and me and Brad ended up getting eliminated in the top 8. It was just insane, you know, like the entire car ride home, like we were just giddy. And, you know, I was a little miffed at the time because top 8 didn't qualify for a Pro Tour, and I had just not played in the previous Pro Tour that was the week before. So, you know, it was a bittersweet from my end because I was super happy for BBD, but at the same time, I was just so salty. So the TCGplayer.com Invitational in 2011, this was arguably my biggest accomplishment at the time, but the tournament itself was kind of strange. I took off of work for multiple days where I didn't request off beforehand. I booked the flight maybe 4 days before I flew out. It was surreal because I had just ditched a bunch of responsibilities to go to this tournament, which I had to fly to. My bank account wasn't very big at the time, so I was, you know, I basically did the most irresponsible thing I could imagine doing in my entire life, and I got paid off big time. Before this, you know, I was basically living week to week, paycheck to paycheck, and writing Magic content as a hobby for Star City Games. And, you know, after moving to Roanoke so that my wife could work for Star City Games, this really put us in a spot where we were comfortable enough where I could try to do it full time. Without this tournament, I don't know where I would be. So this was my first open win, Washington, D.C. I believe I was playing Blue-White Delver at the time. This was actually a weird moment for me because it really helped me to justify becoming a full-time Magic player. I was getting more writing opportunities for Star City Games. I believe I had maybe even started doing Versus videos at the time. And, you know, my career was really starting to take off. And it felt like I was able to really justify my leap into playing Magic full-time. And it felt good, you know, basically solidifying my belief that I was a good enough Magic player to start taking this more seriously. And this win in Washington, D.C. was, you know, at the time, it was one of my biggest achievements. It was the first Open I had ever won, and I had played in quite a few at the time. And I got to do it by playing one of my favorite decks in Blue-White Delver. This is actually one of my favorite pictures, and as you can see, I was taking Magic pretty seriously at the time, and I kept winning. This Invitational, obviously, it's Atlanta 2012. This tournament was really special. I'd been working for Star City Games now for a couple of years. I'd been traveling to a bunch of tournaments. I had been working a lot, like really closely with some good friends. Jerry Thompson, Brad Nelson had both moved to Roanoke, and we just played Magic all the time. We talked about Magic all the time. And I could just feel myself getting better and better at the game because I was able to surround myself with these great minds. BBD was also around, you know, but at the time, you know, this really meant a lot to me because this was me proving to myself once again with another like big payday that, you know, it was the right move for me to play Magic professionally. My boy, Dunny! Oh man, I had a love affair with this card. Hexproof was this new-ish ability that had really only been on a handful of cards in the past. I believe Troll Ascetic was the first one, but this was the time where Hexproof really became a keyword ability. The week before the Pro Tour that I was qualified for in Honolulu, Dungrove Elder was the card that I wanted to build around, and I went to a Star City Games Open, and I played this mono green deck in a field full of Delver of Secrets, and people thought I was nuts. And there were only 3 people that played the deck. It was me, Braun-Duin, and David McDarby. And I remember, you know, doing really well with the deck. I ended up top 8ing with this Dungrove Elder deck. I talked to Brad Nelson later on, and he was in a testing house with all these famous pros. And I remember Martin Juza came up to Brad and was just like, "We've been in this house for 2 weeks, and Todd Anderson comes out with a deck that's 10 times better than any of the garbage we have." And he told me that story at the Pro Tour, and it just made me giggle. It made me so happy. You know, this was not a deck that I built on my own. David McDarby was a huge influence on this archetype. You know, him and BBD both helped me get this deck to where I wanted it to be. I ended up playing it at the Pro Tour the next week with a few changes. You know, the opening weeks of a deck, you're never going to hit all the nails on the head. And I ended up having my best Pro Tour finish ever. I made 17th place. I believe I went 7-2-1 in Constructed and 4-2 in Limited or something like that. And that ended up qualifying me for the next Pro Tour as well, which was kind of awesome. Kind of jumping forward in time here a bit. This is 2015. I'm playing the Players Championship Finals against my good friend Jim Davis. I had not qualified for the Players Championship the year before. I was really torn up about it. I had gone to so many tournaments at the end of the year just trying to grind out points to make it, and I fell short. And it was kind of a wake-up call to me where, you know, I can't really slack off. You know, at the beginning of the season, I slacked off. I didn't go to as many tournaments as I could have. When it came time, you know, down to the wire, you know, Brad Nelson made it, and I did not. And for that tournament, I sat down at my kitchen table with Brad for, 4 days straight, just playing heads up every single deck that he thought the competitors would be bringing to the table. I built the deck that I thought Tom Ross would play in Blue-White Heroic, and I just played it over and over again against Brad's, Sultai Whip deck. Every time I would lose, he would say, I think we got it. And I'd tell him to shut up and sit down because my draw sucked and we needed to play again. That fire stayed with me throughout the entire next year, and I ended up qualifying for the Players Championship the next year. And I play tested with Brad again, but we also brought Tom Ross into the fold. He had moved to Roanoke and become a really good friend of ours. It was my goal to win this tournament. I play tested so much and so hard, ultimately getting to the finals against Jim Davis. I looked at the matchups on paper. I knew that I was not favored in 2 of the formats, and I fell short, and it sucked really bad. And I know that saying like second place sucks really bad, but I just remember we had an after party after this event. And I remember going to Brad's house where everyone is celebrating and having a great time. And I'm sitting on a couch in the corner, and you can see the look on my face. I look happy, but I'm not. And it was a weird moment because I should be happy for my friend. And again, I fell short. And it's really hard to put into words when you put a ton of work into something and you fail. I was super happy for Jim. I tried really hard not to be in a funk the whole night, but everyone was just stoked to be there and having a great time, and I was just miserable. I don't know how to explain just how good it feels to see one of your best friends just skyrocket to stardom. I don't know how many of you know Brian personally, but he is one of my favorite people to be around. His smile just makes you smile. His really bad jokes sometimes make you smile. Watching him skyrocket to stardom in Magic was just so strange, but so satisfying. I knew he was a great player. I knew he had the drive to get there, and him winning the Grand Prix Master slot to qualify for Worlds and then taking down 23 others of the best players in the world was just something to behold. And, we ended up having Nate Holt come to Roanoke, Virginia to do an Enter the Battlefield on, the Roanoke crew. And it was right after Brian had won Worlds, and it was just a really great experience. Everyone was giddy. It's one of my greatest memories of Brian, and one of the reasons why I'm so proud of him. Oh, y'all are just showing all my friends' accomplishments and not mine. So this is Jerry Thompson, as you probably know, Pro Tour champion, Nashville 2017. I've been watching a lot of my friends win on camera over the last few years and not really being there in person, which is a little disheartening, but at the same time, it makes me feel really good that my friends are having, so much success in the game. Jerry Thompson has been playing Magic longer than I have, and I've been playing Magic, over half my life. Watching him actually take home the crown in Nashville was just so awesome. Even if it was playing a little kid zombie deck, it's still great to see your friend win a Pro Tour. And Jerry had only won Pro Tour top 8 previous to this, playing way back in the day. It was a Restoration Angel control deck. And he's kind of known for playing these super grindy control decks. And I don't know who convinced him to play the little kid zombie deck, but I'm really glad they did because it paid off for him. Oh, this is such an insanely good moment. This year, I took my wife to see her first Alabama game. We are both huge Alabama football fans, both from Alabama. And she had never been to an Alabama game live before, but we've been watching them on TV for the entirety of the time we've been together, over a decade now, and it was such an insane moment. The game itself was so close, and just the final moments of Tua Tagovailoa throwing a touchdown pass after getting sacked for over 10 yards on the previous play. It was insane. And for those of you who are not huge sports fans, I apologize because this probably makes no sense to you. But just the look on my wife Callie's face when the final play happened was just worth the extraordinary amounts of money that I had to pay on tickets to go to see this game. Well, this must be the last one, right? Because this is the last time I put up a reasonable finish. This was the Roanoke Invitational for Season 1 last year. I was playing Death Shadow in Modern, and the top 8 was Modern. There's actually a really sweet story in this game. Well, it's Game 5, and basically, top 4, multiple thousands of dollars are on the line. A shot to put my face on a token. I get to the point where I have to put 2 Death Shadows into play that are 2/2s because my opponent is playing Eldrazi Tron and he has hit 7 mana. And I have to try to put some pressure onto the battlefield to actually close the game before he starts pounding me with these giant creatures. Unfortunately for me, my hand contains 3 more lands, which I had cast a bunch of Thought Scours, and I was flooding out really bad. But I had 1 copy of Stubborn Denial left over. And if my opponent plays an 8th land and casts all his dust, I'm basically dead in the water. But I put my 2 Death Shadows into play, and I pass the turn. And my opponent draws for turn, immediately plays his 8th land, and cast all his dust. And without thinking, I just tapped a blue and put Stubborn Denial onto the table. And my opponent just starts shaking his head, and he bends it. He puts it in the battlefield because it's so rare that a Death Shadow is not a 4/4 that just auto counters it. And also, why would I play Stubborn Denial if it wasn't going to counter the spell? He uses his last mana to play a Dismember, pays his 4 life, kills a Death Shadow, and he looks down at his life pad and sees that I'm at 11 and my Death Shadow's only 2/2, and then he gives me this look like, what did I just do? And Brad Nelson was watching from the sidelines, and after the game, he just ran over to me. He's just like, I can't believe you just did that! And it was me playing at a level that I hadn't played in a very long time, and I probably won't ever be able to play at again. Just having the confidence to basically bamboozle your opponent out of thousands of dollars was basically my only way to win that game, and the fact that it worked out was just mind-blowing. Well, this was a really fun episode to do. I hope y'all enjoyed it. Going down memory lane is such a delight. I love telling stories, and I hope that the stories I told were enjoyable. I'm Todd Anderson. This has been Flashback, and I hope to see you soon.